እንደምን ዋላችሁ ውድ አድማጮቻችን ሲን ተፈራ ባላለው የሴታዊት ዳይሬክተር እና አስተባባሪ ነኝ አሁን ደግሞ ሆስታችሁ ሆኜ መጥቻለሁ መቀነት በመተባለው ፕሮግራማችን በኢትዮቲዩብ በየሳምንቱ የሚተላለፍ ዛሬ በጣም ልዩ ፕሮግራም እና ልዩ እንግዳ ይዘንላችሁ ነው የመጣነው ሆርተንስ Mbea የኔ የልብ ወዳጄ ናት ሆርቶንስ እዚህ በጣም የሚያምረው አፍሮፒያን የሚባል ሱቋንን ያለ ነው ስለዚህ መጀመሪያ ዌልካም Thank you for joining us. So I'll be talking to you in English and doing a bit of translation as we go. Can we start by introducing yourself? Tell us who's Hortense.
Okay, so Hortense. My name is Hortense Mbea. I'm from Cameroon. I was always a Pan-Africanist because of the way that I was brought up. So I wasn't born in Cameroon. I was born in the US. I traveled around the world as a youngster, but I always had a very strong connection to Africa. And as soon as I finished school, I just moved back to Africa, which was Ethiopia. So yeah, a Pan-Africanist, someone who's always been in love with Africa, who was out of Africa, and always given an image of my continent that was something I could not accept. So it's always been my mission in life to change the narrative of my continent since I was a child.
And you grew up in France.
So I grew up in France and many other countries. I was in France, in Germany, in the UK, in Belgium, in Switzerland, in the Congo. So the Congo was probably my favorite country where we moved when I was a teenager. I finished my high school in Congo. It was the first country where everyone looked like me. Because I always grew up I always lived in these countries where everyone was white. That was the standard. I always stood out, but not in the best way necessarily. I always had to also stand up for myself. Also had to prove to the people I was around that, you know, I was no different. That I was worthy, that we were all the same, that I was human. So moving to Brazzaville, to Congo, was like a foyer. Like a breath of fresh air. I can finally be around people who look like me, who understand me, who value me. So that was probably one of the best and most transformative experiences of my life. Yeah.
Were you traveling due to your parents' work?
Yes, so my dad was a diplomat. And I never really lived in Cameroon. But the wonderful thing about my parents is that even though we were raised or born in these Western countries, they were very strong African parents. So whenever you step back into the household, that was Africa. That was Cameroon. We ate Cameroon. We listened to our music. We watched our movies. We were raised as strong and proud African children. Always proud of Africa. And that's also how I found myself in Ethiopia. I moved here because my dad was here.
So that's your connection, your first.
That's my very first introduction
original
to,
connection
yes,
to Ethiopia. So how long ago was that you first moved to Ethiopia?
So the first time I came to Ethiopia on vacation was in 1999.
Okay.
A different century.
Well, at the end of
that millennium, I came to see my dad here in 1999 for the very first time. I did not know I was going to move. He had just been appointed here, so I just wanted to come and visit and see. And when I finished school in 2002, I decided to move back. So I moved back to Africa via Ethiopia. And I've been here more or less ever since.
Since 2002?
2002. But I had a 5-year gap.
So this is really home for you? Can we say that?
It is. So I tell people that I've been adopted and abducted by Ethiopia. I had no idea that this was going to become home, especially as someone who's very nomadic. I've never settled anywhere, really. It was, like 2 years, 5 years, and then I move on. I'm very curious about the world. I love to travel. I don't feel like I need to attach myself to a specific place. And I feel at home anywhere. I just claim any country. But Ethiopia became home because I married a half Ethiopian. So that really rooted me to the country. And it also opened the country up to me. It's a huge privilege to have a husband who was born and raised here, who's of the culture, and I just, I fell in love with him, and I fell in love with the country.
And your kids? Can you tell me a little bit about your family? You have this amazing, multi-talented, multi-ethnicity, multicultured, beautiful family. So tell us a little bit about your kids.
It's blended, because when I moved here in 2002, I had a child already. I had a son. when I met my husband. So my son is 100% Cameroonian, but he speaks Amarinya, he reads, he writes. He's 27 years old now, but he's Batam Habesha.
Yeah, Batam.
Like even when you see him, he
Yeah.
looks Ethiopian now. And then with my husband, I have 2 children who are a girl who's 15 and a boy who's 17. And as someone who was born outside of my country and who didn't speak any Cameroonian language, because my parents came from 2 different tribes and they didn't speak their languages, so they spoke French at home. So I was raised in a French-speaking household. And it was always a handicap when I would go back to Cameroon on vacation. On my mother's side or my dad's side, we couldn't communicate. There was so much happening in the local language that we didn't have access to. There's so many things that are not possible in French when you're home, you know? And I felt like I was in limbo. So with my children, we wanted to make sure that there was no limbo. So my daughter and my son speak fluent Amharic. They read and they write it. They also speak French because of me, or thanks to me, I don't know. And then they have English for whatever reason.
It's the
global
it's
language. The imperialism. So Italian, English, French, and Amharic, and they're working on other languages. Like they're starting to learn Chinese, Arabic, and Spanish on their own. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. Can I try to translate a little bit
of
this
ahead.
and come back? I won't do it justice. ስለዚህ እንግዶቻችን ሆርቶንስ ትንሽ ስለ ራሷ እየነገረችኝ ነው። ኢትዮጵያ የመጣችበት ምክንያት መጀመሪያ አባቷ እዚህ ዲፕሎማት ሆነው was he the ambassador here? በመጡ ጊዜ እሳቸውን ለመጎብኘት ነበር የመጣችው። ከዛ ግን ፍቅር ያዛት፣ አገባች። ስለዚህ የኛ ሆነች. Then we claim you. We have claimed you since 3 ልጆች አሏት እና ኢትዮጵያዊም ናቸው ካሜሩኒያንም ናቸው እና ብዙ ቋንቋዎች ይናገራሉ. That's actually the first thing that struck me about you when I first met you. And our friend Gifty, we have a common friend Gifty. I actually remember her saying they actually have their own language as well. They mix all these languages and
sometimes,
Now what are they speaking? It's not Amharic, French, English,
it's a
Italian.
Mixture,
it's something else. Which is amazing, you know.
That's funny.
You're absolutely global citizens, but because we have to focus on you for this show.
Okay.
Let's go back via languages. Let's talk a little bit about your work. Okay, so you're an interpreter.
I am.
You're a designer, and I think maybe a few other things as well. So tell us about that journey and about this beautiful store where you're hosting us as well.
Okay, so maybe let me start with the interpretation, because that's something that I always knew that I wanted to do. I had this ease of learning languages because I traveled to all of these countries.
I'm envious.
And I'm sorry.
No, I find
there's still
I find it difficult. No,
I mean,
I find it difficult to learn languages.
And then I also love to communicate. So for me, learning languages, it opens up a door or a window into people's culture.
Sure.
And wherever I go, even if it's just for 1 week, I want to learn a few words. And when people see that I make the effort of learning a few words, even if I'm speaking gibberish, they see that I'm going towards them, and I've never been rejected anywhere. You know. So I always knew that I wanted to be a translator, an interpreter. Though my dad wanted me to be a diplomat like him, I was like, I don't have the patience. I do not have the diplomacy.
It's a diplomacy of sorts, though, right?
In a way,
you're opening doors.
You're facilitating dialogue, you know, but it's not in your own words. You're just repeating other people's words. So you are allowing people to communicate across linguistic barriers, but it's not in your own voice, right? So I've wanted to do this my whole life, and I went to school for it. I studied, and I've been an interpreter since 2002, and I graduated, and it's opened so many opportunities for me. Like I've traveled, I've met amazing people. I've worked a lot as a freelancer, which means that I would be hired by whoever could hire me, and I've had the opportunity through that to work with so many varied people. Like I would work with presidents, but I would also work with farmers. I would work with child soldiers, and every single meeting I've done since 2002, which is 23 years now, there's always been something. I always get something from everything, and I always, more or less, always make a connection with the people. So it gives me access to amazing people into their lives and their stories, and I love that. I was an interpreter for the African Development Bank as a staff interpreter for 5 years. So I left Addis for 5 years. I was in Tunisia. I was in Côte d'Ivoire. which was, a very interesting chapter of my life as well. But after 5 years, I just wanted to leave.
Yeah.
I wasn't enjoying the work environment. And when I decided to leave, I wanted to do something more than just interpretation. And I had been very fortunate with ADB that I had traveled a lot with a program called Fashionomics Africa that was focused on fashion, textile, the creative sector in Africa. So I would travel, meet all of these artisans and creatives, do the interpretation. And little by little, I started listening, learning their stories, learning how they were making things. And I said, okay, I want to tell these stories of Africa. And my first idea was, okay, I'm going to move back to Addis when I resign, and I'm going to open a concept store. And I'm going to sell products of different African artists from different parts of the continent, just to introduce Ethiopia to the rest of the continent. And then I worked on my project for like a year on Afropian, and I decided I was capable of having my own products and creating my own things. So I trained. I started by making only jewelry, and little by little it evolved, and I started making clothing, and I have a whole shop.
Yes.
And the brand started as, Afropian, so African,
And
Ethiopian,
right.
let me be a connector. Because when I first moved to this country, my first impression was this is an island without the sea. I feel like I'm in Africa, but I'm not.
Yes.
It was, my first trip here was in 1999, where mentalities were very, very different. They've evolved a lot since then. But, people treated me like an outsider, and it was really shocking because I was used to travel all over Africa and always feel at home.
Yes.
But in Ethiopia, it was difficult. And then when I moved in 2002 and then I got married, I was really lucky that I was embraced because I was with one of the children of the country. But other Africans always felt very disconnected. And I felt like I was in the middle because I'm, very connected to Ethiopia, very African. Let me show them that they're the same.
Yeah.
What's the issue? We're the same people, so let me be the connector. And Afropian was my bridge. Yeah.
Okay. Can I try to translate that
Aizosh.
again? Actually, again, not doing your beautiful story justice. ስለዚህ እንደ ኢንተርፕሬተር ወይ ማስተርጓሚ is the word in Amharic. That's what you were trained for.
Yes.
Where was that in?
So I went to university in Lille in France and also Birmingham in the UK.
እሺ ስለዚህ ሆርቶንስ እንግሊዝ ሀገርና ፈረንሳይ ሀገር እንዳስተርጓሚነት ከሰለጠነች በኋላ ነው ኢትዮጵያ የመጣችው 5 አመት 5 years.
Yeah, master's degrees too.
Yeah, okay. ከዛ በሱ ፕሮፌሽናሊ ሰራችበት አፍሪካን ዴቨሎፕመንት ባንክ የአፍሪካ ልማታዊ ባንክ ነበር የምትሰራው ቱኒዥያ እና አቢጃን አይደለ ከዛ ግን በዛ ስራ ላይ ያየችው ሞር ክሪኤቲቭ የሆነ ወደ አርት የሚጠጋ ስራ መስራት ስለፈለገች አፍሮፒያን የሚለው ኮንሰፕት ተፈጠረ አፍሪካን እና ኢትዮጵያን የሚለውን ሁለቱን ቃል ሁለቱን አንድ ላይ አርጋ የተፈጠረ ሐሳብ ነው መጀመሪያ የአፍሪካ ፕሮዳክት did you used to import your
So I spent 1 year preparing for my very first collection, and during that 1 year I traveled around Africa, and every time I traveled I would get fabrics and beads, and then when I got home in Abidjan, which is where I was at the time, I would just start creating necklaces, creating little different pieces.
Are you wearing your jewelry now?
So yeah, this bracelet is one of mine, this ring as well, but this is not me. This is from this beautiful designer in Dakar, Senegal.
ስለዚህ የተለያዩ ጨርቆች የተለያየ ማቴሪያል በማምጣት መጀመሪያ ጌጦች መስራት ጀመረች and also lips አይደለ you started sewing or did that come way after?
So the fabrics and the clothing started in 2019, but the jewelry and the bags was in 2017. So for the first 2 years it was just accessories.
Okay. And then I'd see you at the kind of the fashion shows or the creative spaces. እና through this journey ወይም በዚህ ጉዞዋ ሆርቶንስ ምንድነው ያየችው ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ ስትሆን ከሌላው አፍሪካ ጋር በጣም ርቀት እንዳለ አይደለ unfortunately a lot of Ethiopians seem to forget or not realize that we're part of Africa. So ትንሽ would you agree?
I think that it's a minority now.
Okay.
So, I've been here for more than 20 years. I've seen the evolution, the new generation, the generation especially of my kids. The ones who are like 15 to 25, they're so Pan-Africanist.
Nice.
They know Sankara, they have an afro. This new generation is going to erase the ones who are now maybe 50, 60, 70 and who thought that it was something separate.
Okay.
They now know it's really evolved.
Okay, but I want to pick up on that because that's really kind of the core of what I want us to talk about today. But when you first came, that's not how.
It was a problem. Yeah, it was very hostile.
Would you say you experienced hostility as
did.
a non-Ethiopian African?
I did.
Okay, tell us about your experience.
Okay, so I remember this particular incident. I was in Mexico, and there was this
Safar.
Yeah,
you know,
the country, Mexico roundabout. Now,
Safar.
Now it's no longer there. It's no longer there. But back in the day, I would take my waraj from my dad's in Torailos. I would go to Mexico and then go wherever I needed to go. So I was in Mexico.
This is before ride, Manaman.
I would take like my minibuses and everything. I was a very, Duri village. So I was in Mexico and there was this beggar, and I would always give money to beggars. And I gave him money, and then I turn around and I hear Barya. And I went back to him and I took my money back. I was like, how do you accept the money of a Barya? That was, to me, that was the most shocking thing that ever happened to me in my life. And I was born and raised in the West. So I was used to white people being racist and always being prepared for that kind of racism. Because, that's what you expect from them, especially back in those days, right? It was very open. But to come to Africa, because as a student in Europe, my only goal was, okay, get your master's degree and then move back to Africa. Run home. So I run home, which is, to me, Ethiopia. This is where my dad is. And all of a sudden, it's home, but it's not home. I'm being othered. I'm being treated differently. Why? Because I'm not from this particular breed of black people. So what kind of black person am I supposed to be? And I would never forget, that Barya, and people calling me Barya, Africa, Ghana, Nigeria. I'm like, those are nationalities, though.
How is it that
they shouldn't be insults. So not, So, but there was a lot of, I think, education, awareness raising that happened since then. And my kids haven't been, subjected to the same kind of rejection that I was. But it was very shocking. It was very shocking and disappointing at the time, very painful.
So this was about 20...
It was 25 years ago. 25 years ago? Yeah.
ስለዚህ ሆርቶንስ አሁን እየነገረችን ያለችው መጀመሪያ ኢትዮጵያ ስትመጣ እንዴት እንዳስደነገጣት። ምክንያቱም ሁላችንም እንደምናውቀው ኢትዮጵያውያን ትንሽ ለየት ያልን ይመስለናል። አንዳንዴ አፍሪካዊም አይደለንም የሚል ኢትዮጵያውያን አሉ። እኔ በበኩሌ ሀገሬን በጣም ወዳለሁ። ግን ሀገሬን ማቃት ኢትዮጵያን ማቃት አፍሪካ ውስጥ ሆና ነው አይደል? There's no other, we've never been anywhere else.
I mean physically
but not just physically, politically, Pan-Africanism,
the OAU was born here.
The EU, and we're so proud of that history. We're so proud of not being colonized and all these things.
Built it.
So this tension with the rest of Africa, it's something that I think we need an honest conversation around.
It needs to be unpacked.
It needs to be unpacked. እና ስትመጣ እንዴት ኢትዮጵያዊ ስላልሆነች ኢትዮጵያዊ ያልሆነች የሌላ አፍሪካ ዜጋ ስለሆነች ያጋጠማትን ስድብም ሊሆን ይችላል። እና እንዴት በጊዜው እንዴት አሳዝኗት እንደነበር እየነገረችኝ ነው። ግን አሁን ደግሞ እንደተሻሻለ አይደለ? Your kids, do you think it's partly because they're part Ethiopian that the experience has gotten better, or?
I think that people are more open-minded. They're more open-minded, especially in that generation. They don't have the reflex of rejecting people. So my kids they're still rejected by older people. They still feel uncomfortable with some uncles, with whatever. There's still a bit of tension. But amongst people who are that age, they're fine.
Okay, but that's also mediated by privilege, I think, because I know your kids
they're protected.
go to
I guess.
international schools. My kids, they grew up knowing they're very proud Africans. They would say African as well as Ethiopian at the same time. But obviously we know this because we live in this bubble, and you can protect them and also expose them to all kinds of people. But I wonder if even in your kids' generation, a kid who doesn't go to that school, a kid who's not as exposed, I wonder if they're still as open-minded as we hope or as we think.
No, they're not.
No,
they're not. But I think it's teachable. You know, when my kids go, I don't know, like to Century Mall or Gast to play, they still have these little incidents because they look different. Even though they speak Amharic with the local accent, people can still tell they're not 100% Ethiopians. So yeah, some of those kids who have not been exposed, who don't understand, will still be a bit aggressive maybe towards them. There will be some rejection, but it's not their like daily. It's not a daily thing for them.
And I think language matters.
The fact that they speak Amharic opens doors for them. It does.
For sure. Because I have friends from other African countries who've lived here or traveled here perhaps as long as you have. And they say in some ways it's gotten better, in other ways not so much. But Ethiopia is a lot more international. Well, let's say Addis, right? Addis is a lot more cosmopolitan. We have 120 embassies here.
We do?
Yeah, 130 almost. Yeah, it's one of the biggest diplomatic hubs in the world because of the AU.
Yeah, logically.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting that you still experience this kind of close-mindedness. I guess.
I mean, if there's no deliberate effort to change people's behavior and mentality, it's not going to change by magic. It goes through education. You have to educate people. So is there enough education, awareness raising, behavior like management? I don't know. I don't know if there's a deliberate effort. Is that a priority though? Because as African countries, we are battling, food insecurity. We're battling all kinds of development issues, social, education, health. Are we really going to focus on the way we behave towards each other? Is that going to be part of our priorities? I don't know. But there needs to be a deliberate education effort for things to change.
So አሁን ትንሽ እያወራን ያለ ነው በተለይ አፍሪካውያን እርስ በርስ እንዴት ነው ያለን መስተጋብር የሚለው ላይ Well, I would say there was a deliberate attention to this around the war and around the northern Ethiopian war.
Okay.
And with the AU stepping in a mediating role, and there was this whole narrative of African solutions for African problems. So some of my friends from other African countries, they've said, suddenly we're very welcome here. Suddenly African solutions.
We're valued.
We're valued and people really kind of looking to Kenyatta, the Kenyan leader at the time, he came in, stepped in and did all this mediation.
Okay.
So yes, but does the more work need to happen around that? Absolutely. Do I personally think it's a priority? Yes, because I actually honestly believe that Ethiopia's salvation will come through Pan-African means. I completely believe that more open, more borders, more trade, more economic relationships. But you can't really work on those things until your mentality changes and people actually remember we're part of Africa,
this continent.
but also blessed to be African.
Right?
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that. I love that we're African. So ጨዋታችንን እየቀጠልን. So tell me about the vision behind Afropian.
So as I said, originally I wanted to be that bridge between Ethiopia and the rest of Africa because I felt there was a need. And I felt that my position as the wife of a half Ethiopian and someone who had been so warmly welcomed here was naturally that of a connector. I was in the perfect position to bring those two sides that felt that they were separate, though they're not, bring them together. But the brand evolved really quickly and I wanted to share more. I wanted to share stories of Africa that people forget. I've always been an ambassador of Africa. I've always had to defend Africa. Like, it's always been since I was a child, proving, explaining, showing that Africa is not a village, Africa is not a country, Africa is a multitude of peoples, and we were before colonization, we were before slavery. So I wanted my brand to be more Pan-Africanist, not just limited to showing Ethiopians how they connect to the rest of Africa, but showing Africans how they connect to each other. Because that is also, to me, our salvation. It's a necessity. It's crucial that we remember and that we unite. Because the founding fathers, when they created the OAU in the 60s, they knew what they were doing. They knew that the only way that we could have power and independence and face the West with all of their systems and their strategies was to have our own African unity. That's what they call Organization of African Unity. Unity is power. So I wanted to be that message of unity. I wanted to show, and I still do, that's still my mission, to show Africans that they are one, that there's this common thread that relates us, that connects us from the north to the south. I've traveled all over Africa, and through art and creativity, through working with artisans, I see that we are all the same. I will go to Algeria, they will weave in the same way that they do in Madagascar. you know? I will go in South Africa and they will dye their fabrics the same way as they do in Ghana or Benin. So, you know, there's this common core. And I just want to, you know, convey this message of African unity, African power, African excellence. I want us to remember what we were before we were interrupted. So we can go back to that and claim that.
I love that. Can I try to translate that? እሺ ስለዚህ ሆርቶንስ አሁን እየነገረችኝ የአፍሮፒያን የሚለው ስራዋ እንዳልነው የአፍሪካ ውስጥ እንዳለን ኢትዮጵያውያንን ማስታወስ ነው አንዳንዴ አይደለ አንዳንዴ ስለምረሳ ግን ደግሞ እርስ በርስ ሁሉም የአፍሪካ ዜጎች ምን ያህል ብዙ የሚያስተሳስረን ነገር አለ. There's a lot that brings us together, right? More that connects us than divides us. እና በተለይ በስራዋ your artisanal work በጨርቅ ስራ ለምሳሌ የሰጠችን ምሳሌ ምንድነው አልጄሪያ የሚሸምኑበት መንገድ ማዳጋስካር ከሚሸምኑበት መንገድ ብዙ አይለይም. I find this really interesting because as a Pan-African show, we consider ourselves Pan-African and definitely our show MeQenet is Pan-African. So we were talking about artifacts or artisanal products, I think we can say, right? All these beautiful things you produce, that you work with. So there's something I want to pick up with you, this idea we have in Ethiopia that what's Ethiopian and what's African are distinct from each other. Okay, so people would say African music, and they don't mean Amharic or music from other Ethiopian languages because we have so many, right? Or they would say Africa lips, you know, Africa lips in Arabic. But all Ethiopian clothes or Ethiopian outfits are actually African.
That is so funny.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you experienced this working?
That's interesting because, you know, when I opened my previous store, on the invitation, the dress code was African royalty. And people were like, I don't have any African clothes, like my Ethiopian friends. And I'm like, but you have your Habesha kameez, you have all of your stuff that you wear.
That's African.
They're like, oh! And I'm like, what did you think I meant? I'm not excluding. And it was really funny to me. And these are people who are Pan-Africanists and who know about Africa and who love Africa, but still the reflex in their head is, Ethiopian clothes are not African clothes. So if Hortense is saying I have to wear African clothes, it must be sub-Saharan Africa, it must be
Congolese,
no, like West
African.
more West Africa, because Ethiopia is sub-Saharan as well. So it's interesting, and it's little things, little reflexes, and I think it's very teachable. And I always bring people back. Like when somebody tells me, oh, African music, I'm like, what do you mean? Or African clothes, or African, I'm like, what do you mean? You know, like don't separate. We don't need this separation. Separation weakens us. Even our brothers in North Africa, it's also funny, it's the same story. They're like, oh, if I go to Egypt, they'll be like, I want to go to Africa. But where are we?
Yeah, well, it's different with the Middle East. You have all these complications.
North Africa, yeah, maybe because the skin color is also different, but it's still the same. Physically, it's the same continent.
Yes, but also South Africa. You know, they have a tension with
they do
with the remainder of the continent
Africa because they've developed in a different way at a different pace. But we don't need separation. And those who feel that they are advanced, take me by the hand and let me move with you. Bring me up to your speed. You know, because we do need to become powerful. When you look at the U.S., for example, with Trump. And all of the tariffs and everything that he's imposing on Africa, we need to look within.
Sure.
And to look within, there needs to be cohesion, there needs to be unity.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because I know we feel the same way about where Africa is heading, and as women, and this is, as you know, a feminist show, so talk to me about women's role in all of this, and Pan-Africanism, and the revival of Africa.
I think that we are in an era where we are realizing, not only as Africans, but globally as the world, that men have not led in a way that was productive for civilization.
Led us very well.
Like they have led us into a wall. Men have initiated so many conflicts and wars and, you know, the focus on capitalism and patriarchy. So maybe now is the time to think of a different system. And for Africa, we're very lucky that we've had so many examples of very positive matriarchal societies. For example, where I come from in Cameroon, in Kribi, our community, our civilization, or our tribe is based on matriarchy. So your name, your lineage, your tribe comes from your mother. And it's a very funny thing because they say you always know who the mother is, you're never sure who the father is.
You say that here too.
Right? So it's in a way a bit derogatory, but still it gives power to women. And it also we have these communities where I come from in other African countries where we initiate women, we teach them how to heal, how to organize community, how to do a certain number of things that would, I think, in today's context, be salvation. You know, the way that women know how to organize, the way that women know how to be peacemakers and peace builders, the way that women keep the family together, the way that women know how to grow on the land. You know, there's so many things that women are supposed to do in Africa. And maybe some people might see it as something negative, like these gender-based roles. But these roles are given to us because we're strong and powerful enough to hold them on our shoulders, right? To carry those burdens. We carry society, family. We carry care when it comes to our health, you know, medicine. Women are very important where I come from. Women can be like, there are women that are identified when they are very young to be trained.
To be healers.
To be healers, you know, and they're not seen as witches. They're taught from a very young age. I have an aunt who knows, like she's a walking pharmacopoeia. Like she will know every single herb, what it's used for. She'll know how to heal you. So we have these things that are specifically for women that have been demonized a bit by the West. We're called witches, we're called whatever, but as Africans we know. We know, and some things are for the men, some things are for the women. So let's go back to societies that are based on these feminine values of care and nurturing and togetherness and peace building and reconciliation, because women are so forgiving. And women are always the ones to go to make peace, to build peace. And we also know how to go to war. Like a woman who sees that her family, her community, her village are threatened, like Queen Zinga in Angola, you know, the queens that we had in DRC, La Reine Pokou, the Queen Pokou in Côte d'Ivoire. They had to go to war, and they were very fierce because we are like lionesses protecting our cubs. So I think that the women's way, the feminine way, would be much more productive for Africa and for the world today. So we have to go back, in my opinion, to those feminine values.
So walk me through what a matriarchal society might look like. So would you get your last name from your mom then?
Would that be important though?
No, I just want to know what it looks like because I've never been in one. Ethiopia is such a patriarchal society and all our 86 ethnic groups, as you know, every single one, as far as I can figure out.
It's patriarchal?
It's patriarchal, but also patrilineal. You get your lineage from your father's side. And it has a lot of connotation for how we understand ethnicity, for example, because and that's a whole other conversation to have as well with with the ethnic federalism system that we have. But what would it look like in your community, for example?
Okay, so if I look at my dad's side, because I spent much more time in Kribi, which is the coast of Cameroon, where my dad comes from, rather than Edea, which is a bit more inland, where my mother came from. And I know that everything came from my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother. And then the name, we didn't have a system where we had a family name. That came with colonization.
Ah, interesting.
So as you were born, you were given your name. Yeah. So my grandmother was Nlema, the heart. My great-grandmother was Manjoku, the one who carries, the one, you know. So we didn't have that system of, you know, first name, family name. As you were born, you were given a name, and that name had power and would determine your destiny and the way that you would walk.
Would they have last names?
So they did. You could have like 2 or 3 names. My grandmother's last name would mean Lema. That would be, you know, in the Western world, what would be considered her last name, but we didn't really consider it first name, last name. You'd have 2, 3 names based on how people were inspired. 2 or 3
first names.
Yeah.
Okay.
That could be first, last, whatever you want. Yeah. We didn't have the last name system. That came with colonization. Actually, when the colonizers came, they added they gave my grandmother a French name. So on top of her Batanga names, her name is also Catherine, so she became a Catherine, which is a name that she never used. Everybody called her Lema, the heart. That's who she was.
And the language of Batanga?
Batanga, yeah. So I come from, on my dad's side, I come from the Bano people, who are, you find them in Gabon, in Guinea, and in Cameroon. We're the coastal people. We have a big pygmy population where I come from, very ancestral way of living, you know, this oral tradition and transmission. And my dad's tribe, the lineage came from my grandmother and my great-grandmother. We are from a specific village, the Bolongo people, and that was certified by the women of the family. We come from that lineage because of those women. We cannot claim that lineage through the men. It comes from the women.
And the men would get it from their
women
ancestors as well. Okay,
My
so that's really matriarchal.
My dad got it from his mother.
Interesting. Do you think it affected the way women and men related at the community?
It did, because it was a relationship of equals. It wasn't about being superior and inferior. It wasn't the same kind of gender roles. So they did have gender roles. There were some roles that were specific to the women, some roles that were specific to the men. And something that's very interesting is also that the men who were not masculine enough were given feminine roles. Yeah. There were men who could not do what other men did, and they would be asked to watch the children, for example. Yeah. We had that.
You get
we were tolerant
as
well. Okay, so we had that tolerance towards them. But yeah, the woman had her power and her strength, and she was given those roles and that initiation, because when you turned a certain age, when you reached puberty, you had to be initiated into the ways of women. Yeah. And then the men had the same curses, let's say, where they would have to go through their initiation and their rules, like hunting. Yeah. That would be something that the men would do. Taking care of the children, doing the farming, that would be the role of the women. Fishing, the men. Yeah. Building a house would be the men. Yeah. Based on your strengths.
And how do we bring back these values? And of course, we have to be careful, right? They're not. You don't find them all throughout Africa, because Africa is so hugely diverse. But also, how do we bring them back to this day, to this very complex world order now that we have? And you mentioned Trump, and I actually believe that the world order is completely threatened.
There's a shift happening.
But in a positive way, because
something has to give, because this is not sustainable. Yeah. So we have to think of a different way, which is why I was saying let's turn to the women. Yeah. It hasn't worked the way that the men have led us. So let's see what the women can do. And I don't think that the way of women has ever left. I think that as women, we've always protected our ways, and we've always had these circles and these communities. Women naturally, we're never alone. As a woman, I have my tribe, and wherever I travel, right? Yeah. And they support me, and they help me raise my children, and that's my support system. So that I don't think that that's ever left. I think that maybe we don't have enough power, we don't have enough influence, because all of these official, formal systems aren't necessarily made for us. But, for example, in Cameroon, I always go back to Cameroon, we have associations of women, and they have an impact on their communities, because women get together, they're like, no, this is not working. Like, maybe the neighborhood is dirty. Maybe there's these kids who have to go to school and they're hungry because the family doesn't have anything to feed them in the morning. So can we make sure that maybe the teenagers clean up the neighborhood? Yeah. Can we make sure that we give this specific household enough food for them to feed their kids before they go to school in the morning? Women have always done things that have a positive impact on community. There's a system also in West Africa that we call in Cameroon tontine, or the merry-go-round, where you put money in every week. And, at the end of the month, somebody gets all of the money and does something with it. So we've always had a way of organizing. We've always been present. We've always been prevalent, but we don't have enough impact. And we don't have any influence on the policies. We don't have enough influence on decision-making.
It's not formal enough.
So concretely, how do we change things? It's like at a micro level, at a tiny little level, yes, we have impact. We change lives in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our communities.
We hold it together.
But how can we change the world? And for that we need to be allies. We have to have networks that are global, and we have to have networks that go beyond our races and our continents and our countries. We have to have allyship with white women, with Asian women. We have to find a way, because the men are so bold. They're so bold. And a man who's not qualified, who's completely ignorant, will have so much courage and will be so loud and vocal. But how can women also do this? How can we, be bold and stand strong and, ask for things? How do we ask for things?
Or take what's...
Yeah, if it's not given.
Yeah, I think what's our due. The merry-go-round concept, I think they have it in other countries as well.
So many African countries have that.
But
so much drama.
And also in Ethiopia, it's called Ukub. You know about Ukub?
No.
It's called Uqub.
I know about Mahaber, but I don't know. Okay.
So Mahaber and Uqub. Mahaber is a group of, it's usually women, but you have men's Mahabers as well. It's sometimes based on your safar, your neighborhood. It's a way to protect each other. It's a way to come together for, for whatever reason. I was raised in two very, very powerful Mahabers. Okay. There's a small one and a big one. And they started around the time that I was born, and they're still going strong. Wow. So these are my mom's sisters. They've got her. But Uqub is the financial part.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah. So it's the same idea. You pull in a certain amount of money, and you take turns taking that amount. And now you have digital Uqub. So Taylor, on your phone, you can...
Amazing!
Yeah, it's actually pretty wonderful. And it's called digital Uqub. So yeah, I think women have always known how to get together or how to help each other, and it's feminist, it's deeply feminist. So I always say I learned feminism from my grandmother. She didn't know the word feminist.
But she was a feminist.
But she was a deeply feminist in the sense that she didn't let anyone tell her that she was less than a man. And standing up for other women. It's hugely important that you don't just grow for yourself. That's... so again, these are very, very African values. It's and there's nothing in this that's not Ethiopian as well. Like for me, it's always Ethiopian values, which are completely 100% rooted in Africa. So we're definitely speaking the same language. What do you think of gender relations in Ethiopia? And be honest.
Yeah, I'm always honest. I've been very saddened by gender-based violence in this country, especially this summer with the little girl who was brutally murdered. And I thought that her death was really going to bring a shift. And I don't feel like it's brought that shift yet. I see gender relationships in Ethiopia as very toxic. I see a domination of men over women, of boys over girls. The girl has to stay in a specific lane, and it's it's culture, it's tradition, and then you have religion on top. So there's several layers that will keep a girl and a woman in her place. You have to be quiet, you have to be subservient, be a good wife, be a good girl, play your role. Your husband beats you, it's okay. Your dad used to beat me. At some point he's going to stop, but that's not normal. We shouldn't settle for this. And I see my younger sisters, my younger friends, and they're having a very hard time because they're now exposed to other models, to other relationship models, and that's what they want for themselves. But the men here, like in any other African country, it's not only Ethiopia, the men here are raised in such toxic masculinity that it's going to take a lot to heal them, to make them fit for the women and for what the women want. Because the young women here want more. They go to school, so they're educated. They know their value, and they want a man who's going to be a partner. They don't want a man who's going to dominate them, who's going to abuse them, who's going to expect somebody to just be quiet and go with anything that he wants to do. So men needs to be, I think, as any African population, Ethiopian men need to be in touch with their sensitive and feminine side.
And not be afraid.
They need to look at women as someone who's necessary. Like you have a mother, you love your mother, respect your mother, respect any other woman. Treat any woman like you would treat your mother or your sister, though how do you treat your mom and your sister is another story. But there has to be this education where the girl and the boy are on the same level. I was very fortunate that I was raised in a family where there were 4 boys and 4 girls. I didn't realize you come from
I didn't realize you come from such a big
family. It's 8 of us. It's 8 of us. And my dad was a very traditional African man. But surprisingly, he raised his daughters like he raised his sons. Nice. The woman that I am today is the result of the father that I had, who taught me that, I could do anything. And that my fate was not determined by marriage. Even when I got married, he told me, you know what? If it doesn't work out, you come home. I love him. He's great. But if it fails, you know that, dad is here. And then always taught me, you don't need a man. You can be your own man. You can be your own husband. Let your job be your husband. Learn a job. Be strong. Be yourself. Know who you are, and then go and look for a husband. So I was raised to know that a woman can be anything that a woman can be anything that a man can be. And I also had a very strong mother, though she died when I was 15. Wow. So I didn't have her long enough to influence me as much as I would have wanted her to. But I had a mom who also, in the 60s, was part of the first generation of educated Cameroonians, and who showed me, that you can do anything, you can learn, you can go for any dream and goal, and if you work hard enough, you can do it. So I think it's very important to teach girls and boys that they're the same, that they're complementary. Boys do not own girls. The way that I raise my children as well, I raise my sons to be feminists. I raise my sons to defend, protect women when they need it. Yeah. I raise my sons to know when to go to a woman when they need a woman's support. I raise my sons to know, the differences and also the similarities. And I think that that's the responsibility of African mothers and Ethiopian mothers. Do not raise your sons to be toxic. Do not raise your sons to think that they cannot clear the table. No. They cannot be in the kitchen. They cannot change a diaper. Why not? Are they handicapped?
But they eat as well, right?
No?
They eat as well.
They want to eat. They don't want to cook.
I know.
I come back from work. I'm tired like you are. Can we cook together? Yes. Why would I have to?
Maybe you're better at it than I am.
Why would I be?
Yeah. No, I'm saying I would tell the man, maybe you're better at cooking than I am. So.
Some men are. Like, again, my dad, rest his soul. I'm very lucky that I had the dad that I had. So my dad was raised in a family of 12. And a lot of his siblings died. And at the end, there was only one girl left. So when they were growing up, it was only one girl and like 6 boys. So the girl can't be doing all the cooking. No. So my grandma had everyone in the kitchen.
Good
my dad was an amazing cook. And until the moment of his death, even though he had chefs, he had people working who could cook whatever he wanted them to cook, he would still go to the kitchen. Yeah. Like when he felt like having a specific meal, he would put his music on, James Brown, whatever. Yeah. He would call us and show us how he was cooking, and he would cook for the kids. Yeah. And he was very happy to.
And you need to see that. You need to see it. You can't teach it in theory.
No.
You can't tell your kids, you can cook too, and they've never seen their dad cook. You have to lead by example.
The chores were, spread amongst the girls and the boys in my family. My brothers know how to cook. They know how to sew. Yeah. They know how to iron.
They're not dependent on.
They're completely independent. I learned how to iron a suit when I was 10 years old. My dad taught me how to iron a suit. And he told me, you need to know how to iron a suit because you're going to be wearing suits. Yeah. Not because your husband...
for your husband?
No, never. No,
I love that.
It wasn't like, your husband... He's like, no, you're going to be wearing suits. So you need to learn how to iron
Your dad was
suits.
Feminist? He was a feminist?
He was. Yeah.
And does your husband, does he cook?
He does.
I know he's very supportive of your work.
He is. And he started, when I met him, being raised by a very Italian mother, he didn't do anything. But I was like, dude.
His mom is half Ethiopian, half
Italian.
Like and his dad as well.
The same. Okay. But with this very, Italian, Ethiopian, boys don't cook. So he would spend a lot of time in the kitchen with his mom, but he never had to cook. And when we moved in together, I was like, dude, if I have to do everything, I'm going to hate you. Yeah. So you're going to have to learn. And then he realized that he had learned by watching his mom. So he started testing recipes, and he realized that he enjoyed it. Yeah. So we're in the kitchen, he cooks his Italian food, I'll cook whatever I want to cook. And, that's something that he does very, very naturally, but he never did it before me. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know everybody's better off when they can do whatever is interesting for them.
You need to eat, you need to cook.
I know, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Is there anything else you want to tell me about you being non-Ethiopian African, your experience here? You're creative, obviously, seriously talented in the creative sector, but with your role here. Anything else you want to talk about?
I would want to say thank you to Ethiopia. I really want to say thank you to Ethiopia because this country has completely changed my life. When I first moved here, I was a child. I was really young. I was starting my professional career, and this country gave me my children, gave me my husband, gave me this career, my career as an interpreter, but also my career as an artist. The fact that Afropian is known started here. Yeah. People gave me their support straight away. Like the brand really picked up immediately. So I was always embraced by Ethiopia. I was embraced by Ethiopia as the wife of an Ethiopian. I was also embraced here as a designer. People were really excited to see what I brought to the table. Most of my customers are Ethiopians. The fact that now I can go international is because I started here in Ethiopia. I want to say thank you to Hub of Africa Fashion Week and Mahalet Teklemariam, who gave me my first opportunity in 2019 when I did my first clothing collection at Hub. And I was in Vogue Italy after that collection. So it, snowballed into so many different things. This country has given me so much. So I'm very, very, very grateful to Ethiopia. And I know that, Ethiopia is not perfect. None of our countries are. And I want Ethiopia to do the work. I want us to do the work. I want us as mothers to raise the boys in a way that is not hostile, toxic to the girls. I want us to raise our girls in a way that empowers them. I want us to understand the power of women in unity. And I also want Ethiopians to understand the power of Pan-Africanism, especially now. If you look to countries like Burkina Faso, they're leading the way. They're showing us that we have to detach from the West. Ethiopia was never colonized, so let's not be colonized now. As I was saying earlier, Trump is coming with his tariffs and his nonsense decrees and whatever. So let's look within.
It's time to look inwards.
It's like,
towards Africa and not...
It is. And there's so much. It's like 55 countries, not 54. It's 55 countries in Africa. It's, we have purchasing power, we have creativity, we're young.
It's the youngest population in the world.
And growing, and we have the skills, we have the brains. So let's do something here and let's develop Africa. Can we please develop Africa?
Yes.
Why are we still underdeveloped, developing?
But also, what does it mean? But that's a conversation for a whole other day.
There you go.
Yes. Thank you so much, Hortense. Honestly, this has been such a pleasure. Merci. Thank you. ተመልካቾቻችን እንግዲህ ሁሉንም ለማስተርጎም አልሞከርኩም ግን ሳዋራት የነበረው ዛሬ ወዳጄ ሆርቶንስ ምቤያ ነው በአፍሮፒያን ሱቋ ተገኝተን ስለ ብዙ ነገሮች ተወያይተናል መጨረሻ ላይ በተለይ ስለ ፓን አፍሪካኒዝም ወደ አፍሪካ ሴቶች መመለስ እንዳለብን ተነጋግረን ነው እየጨረስን ያለነው ስላዳመጣችሁ እናመሰግናለን